Part B. The Conversation. Always have it. A few years ago, I attended a roundtable discussion in my industry and met Alana. She was seated at the other end of the table, so during the session we only exchanged eye contact. But after listening to her comments to the group, I was curious to learn more about her. At the mingling session after the discussion, I sought out Alana to talk with her. On the surface, we didn't have much in common. She was considerably older than I was, probably in her 60s. She didn't have kids. She just moved to the area for the first time, and she had a niche specialty that I knew little about. And yet we effortlessly chatted until the event broke up. We decided to grab a quick glass of wine together, and 2 hours later we were still discovering all the things we connected on, and all the ways we might help one another. She had extensive experience as a coach, which she much preferred to being a trainer. The training component of my business was really taking off, and I loved that kind of work, so I needed to start finding collaborators who could fulfill my clients' coaching needs. Today, Alana and I are still working together, and we regularly refer clients to one another. Yet if I'd just gone on surface appearances when I met her, ignoring my curiosity about her and assuming that we had nothing in common, I never would have developed this fruitful relationship. I remember walking home that night after Alana and I met, reiterating my philosophy to myself. Always have the conversation. My relationship with Alana is a continual reminder for me that when an opportunity to make a connection presents itself, take it. Engage someone in a conversation, rather than staying silent, because you never know where the conversation may lead. No matter where we are in our careers, forging new connections is a vital part of continued development and growth. When we are just starting out, creating and sustaining these connections can seem daunting. Once we've progressed in our professional lives, foundational skills such as effectively making new connections can atrophy, because we don't always use them as often as we once did. In either situation, meaningful relationships are the pathways to productive, fulfilling work, and the methods for building those relationships are the same. Be curious, listen, look for commonalities, and create positive feelings. In the 4 chapters in this section, we'll take a closer look at these concepts to learn how to harness them effectively during moments of interaction, and to understand why you should always have the conversation. Chapter 5. The Law of Curiosity. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. Albert Einstein. Sylvia and I were standing in the same small group at a cocktail reception. We got to chatting for a few minutes, and when she heard that I was a coach, she mentioned that she was thinking about launching her own business. At this point, her husband came to tell her that it was time for them to leave. She asked me if I'd like to grab coffee or lunch sometime, and I said sure, as I almost always do in these situations. We exchanged business cards. Sylvia followed up a few days later, suggesting some dates when we might have lunch. I had an extremely hectic schedule, but found a pocket of time where I could wedge in a meeting. We finalized the details. As I was walking down the street on my way to meet her, there were a million to-dos racing through my head, and I was wondering yet again what I'd been thinking when I agreed to the lunch date. I had barely spoken a few minutes to this woman so far, yet I'd prioritized our meeting over some important and time-sensitive tasks. Given my workload that week, having lunch with a virtual stranger was not exactly convenient. When we sat down for lunch, I suddenly realized that I barely knew anything about this woman, and that we didn't even have a natural starting point for conversation. So I just began asking her questions. Sylvia was also eager to hear more about my coaching work, and she was full of questions for me about my life and my projects. I had assumed that she wanted to pick my brain about starting a business, so I sprinkled in advice as we spoke. The more she told me about herself, the more curious I became. It turned out she was starting a virtual assistant business, worked at a private school, and conducted workshops for teenagers. It was all fascinating, and I wanted to know more about how she'd started the Youth Workshops initiative, more about the genesis of her virtual assistant business and the services she planned to offer, more about her successes organizing assembly programs for private schools. The connections between us and the opportunities for significantly helping one another continued to unfold. I had no idea just how much there was to talk about until we started asking each other questions. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but I can tell you, it never killed a conversation. In fact, showing genuine curiosity about a person's job, life, interests, opinions, or needs is a great way to start a conversation, keep it going, and create connections. Start by being curious. For many of us, starting a conversation with someone can be awkward. It can even feel like a chore. We may feel that we don't have anything interesting to offer the other person, or we don't want to embarrass ourselves by saying something dumb. Or maybe we simply feel as if we don't have time to meet someone new, or to get to know someone better. After all, our lives are already too hectic, and we don't feel as if we need any more friends. But continuing to initiate conversations and be curious about people is fundamental to building valuable relationships, because curiosity creates connections. That is the law of curiosity. When you don't know how to start a conversation, start by being curious. And remember this, people love to talk. You just need to know how to get them going. I don't mean prompting them to launch into a monologue while you passively listen. A good conversation involves give and take. It's an exchange in which two people are genuinely engaged, listening, responding, and connecting to each other. What would you genuinely like to know about the person? Are you wondering what it was like to lead that project that was such a smash hit? Have you heard stellar things about the person's racquetball game? If you are in a situation where you don't know anything at all about the person, ask general questions about the types of things you like to discover about people you meet, their hobbies, sports interests, favorite family or adventure vacation spots, or whatever else those things might be. Often picking one topic to pursue is all you need to get the dialogue rolling. Once you are talking, one subject can flow into the next one, which can flow into the next, and before you know it, you've formed a connection. Curiosity creates connections. Before meeting Sylvia for lunch, the only thing I really knew about her was that she hoped to expand a business venture she'd started. But I didn't even know what that venture was. I assumed that she'd asked me to lunch because she wanted some coaching around how to grow the business. As I continued asking her questions, seeking out how I might best be of assistance, I discovered more and more things that we had in common. I became intrigued by the evolution of her career, and was especially excited to hear about her work with teens, an age group I'd been wanting to do more work with myself. Halfway through our salads, it was no longer me coaching her, but her advising me on how to approach schools, when to book workshop programs with them, and what types of material worked best for that demographic. By the end of lunch, I'd hired her to consult with me on how to take the teen workshops I'd been designing and develop them into a full-fledged program. Sylvia didn't come to the lunch expecting to be pitching her services, yet once she began to see how much our interests overlapped and how we could help one another, she became just as excited about it as I had. Our sincere curiosity about one another uncovered the myriad things we had in common. We'll see in Chapter 7 that the law of similarity, basically what people have in common, can be one of the strongest connectors. Without actively following our curiosity, Sylvia and I may not have so quickly uncovered the wealth of things we shared. As we worked together on my teen workshops project, we didn't just discuss the task at hand. We talked about all the developments in each other's lives. I heard about her man troubles. She heard about my preschool quandaries, and we both helped each other think through our next steps. I wound up doing some coaching for her too, consulting with her about how to grow her business. As a result of curiosity, we found multiple opportunities to work together, learned how many common interests we shared, and created a connection that outlasted not just the lunch, but the launch of both our projects. We established a mutually rewarding relationship that continued to blossom. Genuine curiosity can lead to more authentic, engaging conversations, which lay the foundation for sustained relationships. Even seasoned professionals who understand and have successfully built valuable connections over the years can benefit from remembering how to stay curious. As we get further along in our careers, our plates fill up, and we can forget the value of nurturing new connections. Showing your genuine interest in someone else increases your likability, and you never know what opportunities it may open up. Do you know how to ask a question? Curiosity seems simple enough. Just start asking questions, right? That's one approach, but the success of it depends in part on how adept your conversation partner is at answering. You can help her along by varying the types of questions you pose. Ask open-ended questions at the start of a conversation, or when the conversation has hit a dead end. Use probing questions to further the dialogue when already immersed in a discussion. Choose broad topics, or home in on something specific. It doesn't actually matter, as long as what you are asking stokes your genuine curiosity about the person. Your goal is to uncover what you might have in common, and what value you might bring to that person. The value aspect of our interactions with others is discussed further in Chapter 10. Open up and... An open-ended question is simply one that requires more than a 1- or 2-word response. Typically, open-ended questions begin with what, how come, or why. Asking, "What brings you here?" encourages the other person to provide a full response, whereas, "Did your company send you?" only provides an opening for the other person to respond with a yes or no answer, or possibly with a simple and conversation-limiting comeback, "Did yours?" Almost any question that can be answered with a yes or no, or another one-word response, can be rephrased to encourage a dialogue. Change the "do you" or "would you" into a "what" or a "how would you," and you've opened the door to a deeper conversation. "Do you like living in Atlanta?" becomes, "What do you like about living in Atlanta?" "Would you recommend this vendor?" becomes, "How has working with this vendor helped your company become more productive?" When starting a conversation, try to have a few possible topics in mind, in case you need to go through a couple to get the conversation going. The openings you choose should be person and situation dependent, based on whom you're talking to, and the circumstances that have brought you together. Do you work in the same industry? Are you both attending a specific event? Does the person live nearby? Making the openers relevant, even if only in a general way, creates context for the dialogue and fosters the connection that comes from it. After you say, "Hi, I am," test out some opening questions, as suggested here, and mix them up in different conversations to keep your communication and connection skills in optimal shape. Make a generic or personal inquiry. When you are meeting someone for the first time, especially if you are in an unfamiliar place, it can be difficult to find person or situation-dependent openers. There are any number of broad fallback questions you can use in these situations, though, so put them to work. Many of these questions may seem like tired workhorses we've all heard before, so at first the person's responses might sound a bit rote or unenergetic. Nonetheless, you can use the responses to pick up on interesting details about the person, so that you can then ask further questions and expand the conversation. What do you do? Although this one is trite, it's also tried and true. This is the evergreen question, something you can pose to anyone. A twist on this question is the equally reliable, "What do you do when you're not working?" If you are addressing someone who's retired, or whose employment status is unknown, or might be a delicate subject, you can tweak the question slightly by asking, "What field are you in?" or even, "What do you want to do next?" The key when employing this question is to listen to and understand the answer. In other words, you need to truly hear what the person is saying. Try to glean what kind of client or contact information might be useful to the people you're speaking with through their responses, and follow up with new questions. How did they choose the industry they're in? If they are entrepreneurs, what was it like to land their first client? The possibilities for continuing the conversation are endless. Just follow your curiosity. If someone in turn asks you, "What do you do?" take the opportunity to open up further avenues for dialogue. You can respond by saying, "For work or in my free time." "What do you think of this, fill in the blank, weather?" Another standard icebreaker is to ask about the weather. A question about the stormy, unseasonably warm, or freezing cold weather may lead to meaningless small talk, or it may open up more fruitful connections. The response could lead to a conversation about the cost of snow removal, or comparisons with the weather in the person's hometown. It could lead to discussions about favorite vacation spots, or why the weather is or isn't so great for your business. Start with a generic question, and be ready to pursue further threads of dialogue based on responses. Do you have kids? This one can be a great conversation opener, even if the other person's answer is no. If the answer is yes, then the abundance of possible topics is fairly clear. If the answer is no, you can follow up with a lighthearted remark such as, "So you get to sleep through the night," or "I miss the days of kid-free vacations," and see where that takes you. Ask their opinion. Asking someone's opinion of something is a surefire conversation starter. Choose whatever topic you'd like: politics, sports, the latest news from Wall Street. Just make sure it's something you want to talk about too. If you are not genuinely curious about it, you won't be fully engaged in the exchange, and your chance of forging a real connection diminishes. As busy and seasoned professionals, sometimes we rush to get down to business. We would all benefit from remembering to stay curious and ask varied questions. Don't just stick to the usual, and be prepared to share your opinions as well. After all, you are trying to establish a dialogue. When pursuing the opinion route, it's best to stay diplomatic with people you're still getting to know. Remember the advice every mother seems to dole out. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. This doesn't mean you have to lie about what you think. What you don't say can speak volumes too. The options here are endless. Here are a few examples. What did you think about that speaker? This is an interesting option because it could so easily be a throwaway, not just for the person being addressed, but for you. Before you ask someone else this question, ask yourself if you truly care, and why you should. If you ask the question and you're not even interested, it's going to show. But there could be any number of reasons why you are in fact interested in the response to the question. Perhaps there was a speaker comment you missed, or wanted to make sure you understood. Maybe you are in the midst of planning a speaker-led event yourself. Once you are clear on why you care, then you can form the most fruitful follow-up questions. What's your take on the new CEO at fill in the blank? A variation of this question might be, what's your take on the first-round draft picks? Asking about the latest corporate or sports news event of the moment can lead to a conversation about all kinds of things. Employment histories and favorite sports teams are just the beginning. The corporate twist especially often leads to the "what do you do" question. What's your view of the recent foreign policy changes? Opening a political discussion with someone you just met might be stepping into a minefield, but it can be a great way to probe your connection with someone who is already an acquaintance. This type of question, of course, alludes to political dispositions without flat-out asking about them. It can also lead to any number of other topics. If you weave in a reference to where you read a particular tidbit, for instance, that can open up a discussion about the state of the media today. Querying people about their political opinions can lead to extremely engaging and emotionally charged conversations. Politics tend to reveal the ways people are either united or polarized. If both of you are enjoying the back and forth, keep going. If things get too heated, sidestep conflict with a more conciliatory remark such as, "I'll have to give that perspective some thought." Pose a hypothetical. A variation on asking for someone's opinion is to ask what the person thinks of a hypothetical situation. These queries are thought-provoking and often coax people out of their pat response patterns. Hypothetical questions are best used after a bit of small talk, once a connection has been formed, but is still growing in strength. These questions can reveal unexpected things about people to one another, and can range from the professional to the personal, from the practical to the fanciful. How would you handle it if you received a promotion over one of your closest colleagues? What decision would you have made about that situation if you were CEO? What would be the first 3 things you'd do if you won the lottery? When posing hypothetical questions, you want to stay sensitive to the fact that these types of questions can deepen the conversation, but if used in the wrong way, they may seem invasive or off-putting. You can diffuse the potential for discomfort by prefacing the question with preliminary queries such as, "Do you mind if I pick your brain about something?" or, "I'm dealing with a thorny problem. Can I pose the hypothetical situation to you and get your opinion?" Some people do especially well with these types of questions. Think back to the communication style matrix in Chapter 3. Zigzags and circles love hypothetical questions. The zigzags, for their intellectual framework and idea-exploring premises. The circles for the personal aspects of the questions, and how they might be able to help puzzle out solutions. When choosing whether to use a hypothetical question as a conversation starter, you may want to determine the person's communication style first, to see if the individual may be open to this level of inquiry. Seek advice. Advice is a powerful conversation opener in cases when the other person can actually be of assistance. When people can provide assistance, it makes them feel helpful. This creates a positive mood memory, a concept that's covered in detail in Chapter 8. Be clear about the questions you ask, however broad or specific they may be, so that they accurately reflect your interest. If you ask something that, as it turns out, the other person can't help with, then follow up by asking if the person has any ideas about how you can find the information you're after. Being able to give even general advice makes most people feel good and more prone to connecting to you. Can you tell me how to get to? This opener can be a little tricky, because the person responding will probably expect that once you get the directions you need, e.g. to the bar, the hotel spa, etc., that will be the end of the conversation. Still, it can be a natural and straightforward way to approach someone. If someone asks you this type of question, offer to escort them and chat along the way. Which do you suggest? Depending on the environment you're in, you might ask for a recommendation about a breakout session, a course, a restaurant, or hotel. You fill in the blank. This type of question is an easy conversation starter and allows for a simple follow-up, how come? You could also ask something more specific based on the other person's response, such as, is the content of the session basic or advanced? Or, what dish do you recommend? Is the professor a tough grader? Compliment. To compliment someone is to express praise, commendation, or admiration. A compliment is the exact opposite of flattery, because by definition flattery is fake or insincere. Compliments are signs of respect. Of course, you must be genuine in your compliment, lest it come off as flattery. But if there is something that you truly admire and want to express about someone, giving the person a compliment can be a great way to open a conversation. Not only does it create positive energy between you and the person you're addressing, it can also build trust and foster greater understanding. When people realize that you've noticed something positive about them, chances are they'll start looking for things they admire about you, too. This technique is often most effective when followed by a supporting question that reflects your genuine feelings and curiosity. I love that shirt, tie, scarf, jacket, necklace. One obvious but helpful follow-up to this kind of compliment is, where did you get it? I once admired a necklace a woman was wearing, and when I asked where she'd found it, she replied, Ireland. Her response led us into an energizing conversation about travel, one of my favorite vices. The where follow-up can get you talking about any number of topics, shopping, traditions, or family keepsakes, for instance. You'll never know until you ask. I thought the question you asked was really interesting. In my experience, this comment is suitable when in the audience at a conference, speaker, or roundtable event. You can then follow up this compliment with a question. What did you think of the person's response? Another version of this technique works well when building connections with your coworkers. If someone has handled a business situation in an admirable way, compliment your colleague on it. Then ask the person how and why he chose to handle it in that manner. Not only will you learn more about people through their responses, and possibly improve your own professional interpersonal skills, but you'll also strike the right mood memory with the people you're addressing, making them feel helpful and recognized. Use the news, the events-based inquiry. This type of inquiry can be related to the event you're attending, a current event from the morning paper, or even a simple life event such as buying a car. Use the event as a reference point to generate conversation about broad opinions and specific details, and use responses to continue enriching the conversation. Here are some examples, with suggestions for following up on possible responses. Have you been to this event before? Use the response to discuss similar events, asking follow-up questions about how this event compares to others the person may have attended, or upcoming events that may be of interest. What do you think about that fill-in-the-blank news story? Choosing a widely covered current event will open up more possible paths of conversation than asking about something obscure. Follow-up questions could range from the plight of the people involved in the story, to the ways in which different media outlets are covering it, to previous events that current circumstances call to mind. If someone hasn't heard of or been following the news, That person won't have much to say about it, of course. You can handle this situation by quickly sketching in the story for the other person, or simply introducing a new topic of conversation. Have you ever owned a Honda? Asking ordinary, everyday questions such as this one can be surprisingly revealing. Someone you've just met, or are still getting to know, is likely to feel comfortable giving opinions about something as neutral as a consumer product, and this type of question makes most people feel that you value their opinion enough to ask it. Follow-up questions can lead to conversations about the price of gas, the manufacturing methods of different countries, even road trip memories. You name it. Live the law. Create more options. So far, I have provided you with a few examples of each type of conversation opener. Now it's time to expand your conversation comfort level and come up with your own. Here is your challenge. For each type of conversation starter discussed, personal, opinion, hypothetical, advice questions, compliments, and event-based inquiries, look over the examples and change them in some way to make them authentic for you. Then generate at least 2 more original examples for each type. At the end of the exercise, you should have a robust repertoire of questions to use for opening and continuing conversations in any situation. The art of probing. To sustain an engaged conversation, you've got to learn the art of the probe. A probe is a question that digs deeper into the topic being discussed, opening up new material to explore. You've already read some examples of probing questions in the previous sections. Probes are excellent conversation continuers once the initial spark of dialogue has been lit. Even the most curious people, full of probing questions, sometimes find themselves in conversations where they suddenly hit a brick wall. When that happens, it is helpful to follow the lead of the person you're talking to. What has most excited this person during the conversation so far? If you hit a topic, and the other person's energy flags, move on to a new topic until you land on one that helps the dialogue flow again. The more energetic responses you get, the better your chances for continuing to probe in ways that build connection. There are 3 main types of probes: clarifying, rational, and expansion. Clarifying probe. Am I clear? A clarifying probe effectively demonstrates that you are paying attention. Rephrase or summarize what you've heard, and ask if you've understood it correctly. Or if you don't think you have understood, ask the other person to explain in greater detail. Clarifying probes are also great conversation stallers, because if you are thinking about where you want to take the conversation next, they'll buy you time. Be careful about how you phrase these kinds of probes, though. Avoid constructions such as, "Are you saying," which, depending on tone and whom you're talking to, can be misperceived as shock, judgment, or even outrage. Instead, paraphrase what you think you heard, and then check your accuracy with, "Did I understand that correctly?" Rational probe. How come? A rational probe seeks to understand the reasoning behind a stated choice or action. Another way to think about this probe is that it asks, "How come?" instead of "Why?" Intentionally or not, "Why" is a word that almost instantly puts the receiver on the defensive. It makes people feel as if they are being challenged and must defend their responses. "How come" poses more of a genuine inquiry, lessening the possibility that the question will be construed as some kind of attack. To minimize this possibility further, watch your tone of voice and rate of speech. Longer phrasing such as, "I'm curious, what made you opt for that project over the other one?" feels more thought out and less aggressive than a super fast, "How come?" Resist the common urge, though, to express comprehension by filling in the blank with your own response. For example, saying, "How come? Is it because of such and such?" instead of just simply, "How come?" Providing possible answers to your own question before the other person has time to respond shuts down the flow of communication and could make the other person feel as if you don't really want to hear what she has to say. Expansion probe. Elaborate, please. An expansion probe delves for more information about a given response. My favorite phrase is, "Tell me more." This statement invites people to elaborate on something that interests them, which naturally makes them feel comfortable. It also lets them know that you are genuinely interested in hearing what they're talking about, putting them at ease that they are not dominating the conversation. Expansion probes allow you to listen. There's more about listening in Chapter 6. And learn what the other person's authentic interests, needs, and concerns are, and how you might be able to help. These opportunities to assist rise up organically in conversations and can be powerful opportunities for further growing connections. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the relationship. Don't interrogate. As already discussed, with any of these questioning techniques, don't ask unless you want to know the answer. If you don't really care, you are more likely to tune out when the other person responds. Silence descends, and there is no place else to take the conversation. When you ask about something of true interest, though, your follow-up questions come to you more easily, and your body language and energy naturally reflect your interest and attentiveness. But be careful not to let your exuberance tip over into a machine gun questioning style. Bombarding people with rapid queries, regardless of your enthusiasm, will make them feel as if they need to protect themselves, and they'll stay guarded. Enjoy the conversation. Don't turn it into an interrogation. Conversations are two-sided dialogues, filled with pauses and spontaneous asides, during which the people conversing consider and absorb what is being said by others. Sprinkling in information about yourself is important, because it helps build the bond that good communication promotes, making you more likable, and making whomever you're talking to feel comfortable enough to share. Stay curious. If we remain curious, then in conversations we appear comfortable and genuine, even without too much foreknowledge of the person we're speaking with. Curiosity brings out the best in us and prompts us to naturally do all those things that foster positive connections. Maintain good eye contact, give appropriate head nods, ask interesting follow-up questions that show we're engaged. When we demonstrate these behaviors, it's because curiosity does away with distractions and uncertainties. We're focused on connecting, and so that's naturally what we do. To Google or not to Google. The 21st century has put a new twist on the age-old networking question, should you do research before attending an event? With the internet at our 24/7 disposal, we can now spend hours researching people, venues, and events, past, present, and future. Some experts may counsel you to search every bit of information you can before meeting a person or attending an event. I understand the position, and it can certainly increase the range of topics you'll have to be curious about. But my question is, how genuinely curious can you be if you already know all the answers? And if you know so much about a person in advance, won't the actual encounter feel awkward and forced? And won't the other person sense that? The premise of this entire book is that if our approach to connecting with other people is too calculated, it comes off as fake, and is far less effective than if we are genuine in our intent. You may even become uncomfortable knowing too much about a person in advance, and that person may sense some weirdness in you. I do think there is some middle ground on this question. I firmly believe in doing some solid research about a company or industry before attending an interview or targeted event. You don't want to be a know-it-all, but you do want to be well-informed. But obsessively Googling people and getting clogged with information about them before you've even established a genuine connection can block all the natural pathways to creating a bond. When I was meeting with a rather well-known CEO, I did a Wikipedia search on him and spent all of 5 minutes reading the entry before turning to something else. The quick research hit broadened my knowledge of his career, which was helpful, but I didn't learn so much about him that I had nothing to learn about him during our lunch appointment. Somehow, I did end up telling him that he had a Wikipedia entry, and he was so enthralled that he pulled out his BlackBerry to check it out right then and there. We shared a laugh, but the key was that I didn't overdo the research. There is no perfect answer to this quandary, so you must decide what feels right for you. My advice? Do enough research that you have a solid base of background knowledge, but don't go overboard. There should still be plenty you want to know, because, after all, this is the essence of curiosity. When prepping for a meeting or an event, do your due diligence, but don't get sucked completely into the maw of the internet. Be curious, but don't be a stalker. Refresh your memory. The law of curiosity. Curiosity creates connections. Start by being curious. Harness your curiosity to initiate conversations and open up avenues of dialogue. Learn how to ask questions. Open-ended questions create opportunities for conversation. Probing questions are the follow-ups that deepen the connection the conversation creates. Don't interrogate. Stay curious, and continue asking questions that help the conversation unfold in fruitful new directions. But remember that a discussion is a two-sided thing. Sharing yourself is part of the experience, and a key part of building the connection. Restrain your internet tendencies. Use the internet to prep for events and meetings and build background knowledge, but don't go overboard. Knowing too much puts you in a position where there's nothing left to know, deadening curiosity, and taking away that path to true communication. Moderate yourself. Chapter 6. The Law of Listening. A good listener is not only popular everywhere, but after a while he knows something. Wilson Meisner, playwright. One of my executive coaching clients, Jed, is a partner at a leading ad agency. While discussing the impact of good listening, he related a story to me about two young hires, Jerry and Ethan, with whom he'd been working. Jerry and Ethan were both fresh out of college when they joined the agency, with no previous advertising experience. As their team leader, Jed asked them each to sketch out campaign ideas to present to him directly after client meetings, so that he could critique their work and help train them as efficiently as possible. During one initial meeting with a beverage company client, the client kept using the word fresh when describing the ad campaign he wanted. In the campaign proposals to Jed afterward, Jerry, who's athletic and an avid hiker, envisioned presenting the product using an outdoor scene of a family enjoying nature. Ethan, who was in a rock band in college, heard fresh and thought the client wanted something hip, with lots of young people in the scene. "Those ideas aren't fresh," Jed said to them when he saw their proposed campaigns. "I've seen both these types of commercials loads of times. When the client says he wants something fresh, he means he wants something he's never seen before. When you're meeting with clients, you have to listen to everything they're saying. You can't just hear what you think they're saying. That's how you get yourselves in trouble." The next time the team met with a client about the beverage product, Jed was impressed with how attentive Jerry and Ethan were. Each appeared alert and interested, and asked good questions at appropriate moments. Afterward, they collaborated on their follow-up presentation to Jed, and suggested an innovative campaign involving animation. Jed liked it so much that he shared it with the rest of the team, and the concept wound up being the inspiration for the campaign the team eventually designed, and which the client loved. Just as curiosity is all about asking focused, engaged questions to find connections, listening is all about actively hearing and absorbing what is being said. Listening is not a passive activity. It takes energy and concentration to focus on what people are saying and what they mean by it, and to not just hear what you think they mean by it, or what you want them to mean by it. Regardless of where you are in your career, listening is a skill that you must continue to work on. Even executives and colleagues in upper management can find that, while they may listen to what their junior colleagues say, they may not do it as effectively as they could. Listening is a skill that takes constant vigilance. How you listen is just as vital to strong communication as what you say, and it has just as much impact on your likability. It is crucial to do it effectively. Listen to understand. As humans, we fundamentally want and need to be understood, and this applies in all realms of our lives, from the personal to the professional. But being understood requires receptive listening on the other end. If we want others to understand us, we need to learn how to truly listen to and understand them. When building relationships, how you listen can be as important as what you have to say. This is the foundation of the law of listening. You have to listen to understand. Too often we get caught up in our own agendas, concerns, and intentions, and listen only on a surface level. Effective listening is the single most powerful thing you can do to build and maintain a climate of trust and collaboration. Strong listening skills are the foundation for all solid relationships. By listening, we can build trust, assess needs, identify interests and passions, discover commonalities, tune in to emotions and energy, determine communication preferences, uncover known or unidentified concerns. And in the workplace, good listening is also what enables you to determine what motivates an employee, sell more effectively, understand the root causes of issues or miscommunications, reduce conflict, collaborate, and innovate with others. Comprehending what you hear and acting on that comprehension is fundamental to cultivating connections that allow for personal and professional growth. Know what level you are listening on. Before we can harness our listening skills to the optimum effect, we need to understand where we are listening from. Think of this as listening at different levels, all of which serve different intentions in the conversation, and are collectively important in building relationships. In a way, the different levels reflect the varying degrees of focus and effort required in different settings. As you become more aware of how and when you are listening, you will be able to move more fluidly between the levels as the conversation or situation warrants. Level 1. Listening in. Inward listening is the most basic level of listening. It is the process of taking what is being said and finding a way to relate it to yourself, filtering what you hear through your own experience. An example puts it in simple terms. When a friend says, "I love that color blue," and you answer either, "Oh, me too," or "No, I prefer darker shades," you are responding based on your own preferences and opinions, whether consciously or unconsciously. Most people listen on this level most of the time, because it is easy and comfortable. It can also be effective. Listening in is extremely valuable for establishing commonalities, a component that is critical to creating connections and increasing likability. When we listen on this level, we take in what is being said from our own perspective, finding the ways we can relate to it, which contributes to the development of the conversation. Sharing your views, thoughts, or experiences helps you express empathy. This level of listening fosters self-disclosure, which can make other people feel trusted, which in turn can make them feel more comfortable opening up. By opening up in this way and conveying how you think or feel about the subject at hand, you also communicate your willingness to participate in a dialogue, which also builds trust. Of course, when taken too far and over-relied on, this level of listening can be limiting. Remember, this is about listening, not seizing the chance to make it all about you. Once I was at a conference talking amicably with a group of other professionals. Another woman came up to the group, listened in for a few moments, and then, when someone in the circle mentioned that he had just led a team analyzing the possible applications of new technology within the company, the woman who had just joined the group said, "Me too," and she launched into a blow-by-blow account that completely dominated the conversation. No one else could get a word in edgewise. Then I noticed the looks on the other people's faces, which made clear everyone was thinking the same thing. Can you believe how she's going on? And when will she shut up? Even if we'd wanted to engage this woman, she wasn't giving us the chance to. She clearly wasn't picking up on the nonverbal messages of the group. She wasn't listening to what the others were saying while she was talking. The situation reminded me of how important it is to not just listen with your ears, but with your eyes, by picking up the unspoken signals others send. I've introduced inward listening first, because it is the most common and easiest place to start. But it is best to combine this level of listening with other techniques, moving back and forth between them as the conversation warrants. Use inward listening to establish trust and confidence, and to help the conversation along by opening up. Once groundwork has been established, and your initial connection with the other person begins building into a relationship, inward listening helps to further strengthen the bond. Level 2. Listening out. With outward listening, you are focusing on other speakers and relating what they're saying to what you know about them. When you're engaged in this level of listening, and your friend says she likes the color blue, your response is more along the lines of, "Blue looks really good on you," or "Why do you like it?" Outward listening leverages the law of curiosity. It's when you use expansion probes and phrases such as, "Tell me more about that," and "How come?" The woman at the conference who commandeered the conversation would have been far more effective if she'd expressed her parallel experience with the man who'd just spoken, by using an enthusiastic level 1, "Me too," and then followed up with a level 2 question. What were the details of your project? She would have established commonality, while at the same time seeking to broaden the conversation, a 1-2 punch of excellent communication and information exchange. Combining the different levels of listening and moving back and forth between them when appropriate is a powerful way to build connections through listening. Level 3. Listening intuitively. Intuitive listening expands on Level 2 listening, but instead of just focusing on what the person is saying with his voice, you are paying attention to how it is being said and to what is not being said. You are picking up on the speaker's body language and the general vibe you get from the speaker, as well as the words. Intuitive listening is about hearing more than the words that are spoken. When we listen intuitively, we are attuned to the speaker's tone, facial expressions, and stance. When you are engaged in intuitive listening, you notice that when your friend says she likes the color blue, she does so with a tranquil note in her voice, and you respond, "You seem so calm when you say that. Do you find that color soothing?" You pick up on what is being said, verbalize your perception, and ask for confirmation of it. To date, my most powerful experience with intuitive listening occurred when I was taking my coaching certification course. Part of the training was to do coaching sessions with other students in groups of 3. I was working with my fellow students Ellie and Naomi. It was Naomi's turn to be the client, and Ellie's turn to be the coach, and I was in the role of observer. Naomi had just gotten married, and she chose the subject of when to have kids as the topic of her coaching session. She launched into a rational analysis, pointing out that her husband was still in business school, and that she was just starting to build her own business. On the other hand, she countered, she was past 30, and worried about waiting too long. Ellie intermittently intervened with questions to advance Naomi's exploration of the idea. Suddenly, Ellie said to Naomi, "I get the sense that you're ready to have kids, but don't want to admit it, because you're afraid your husband isn't ready. Is that possible?" Naomi stared at her like a deer caught in headlights. Ellie had been listening to what Naomi said, but knowing her classmate a little by this point, she also listened to how she said it. "I think you're right," Naomi said. "I am ready. I couldn't figure out why I was unsettled about it until you said that just now." By comprehending both the verbal and nonverbal clues, Ellie helped Naomi articulate what she truly felt and thought. Naomi broached the subject with her husband, even though she was hesitant to do so, and it turned out he felt he was ready too. 2 months later, she was pregnant. The key with intuitive listening is to not assume your interpretation of what the person is saying is correct. Ellie handled that perfectly for 2 reasons. 1, she expressed her own interpretation of the situation by using the phrase, "I get the sense," and 2, she followed up her statement by asking for confirmation, adding, "Is that possible?" She didn't try to flat out tell Naomi what she was saying or thinking, as if it was a foregone conclusion, and she checked the accuracy of her assertion by asking Naomi what she thought. Intuitive listening does not just happen in personal situations. It is extremely effective, critical even, in professional settings as well. It helps you home in on the nuances of communication and hear the unspoken message. When my coaching client Aaron was promoted, one of his new direct reports was a colleague named Sean, who'd been his peer before the promotion. Soon after the seniority change was announced, Aaron noticed that Sean's behavior toward him seemed to shift. Sean began responding to Aaron's questions in a curt fashion, rarely making eye contact, and fidgeting restlessly whenever Aaron spoke during meetings. Aaron spoke to me about his belief that the change in Sean's behavior had to do with the fact that he had been promoted and Sean had not. He acknowledged that he wasn't sure if this was the correct assessment of the situation, so he set out a plan of action to find out. Aaron asked Sean if they could get together, and he opened their meeting by saying, "I want to address any concerns or discomfort that may exist about the recent change in our roles. Can you help me understand how we might best move forward?" Sean was reluctant to discuss the situation at first. Aaron continued to probe by asking, "How can I help you continue to grow professionally?" Once Sean believed that Aaron truly wanted to create a positive work environment, the conversation began to turn. Sean opened up about how he felt he'd stopped being given new opportunities at work. As a result of the conversation, Aaron was able to make sure Sean was put on projects that would let him continue developing his skill sets. and Sean became one of the most effective employees on Aaron's new team. By listening intuitively to Sean and engaging him in conversation, Aaron was able to take an uncomfortable and possibly unproductive dynamic and turn it into something that was mutually beneficial. Intuitive listening makes people feel as if the other person relates to, empathizes with, and validates them. On a very deep level, it makes them feel heard. So the ability to listen intuitively is a very likable trait. It builds confidence in the connection and helps the speaker feel as if his needs are being understood and addressed. The key to effective intuitive listening is to know when it is appropriate. It is impossible to maintain this level of engagement all the time. It's simply too exhausting. And if you demonstrate intuitive listening with people you've only recently met or don't know well, it could seem off-putting to them to be read in this way. Use your judgment, and remember that alternating between the 3 levels of listening at the appropriate moments is the best way to harness the natural give and take of a conversation. When you do engage in intuitive listening, be thoughtful with your tone of voice to make it clear that you are proposing and not assuming, and stay open to being wrong. It is not a bad thing to be wrong in your intuitive listening. It can actually open the door for further connection. Getting to the essence of something is a process, and that is what communication is all about. Listen up. A key part of successful communication, then, is recognizing what level of listening you are engaged in. Now you must build your skills by learning how to listen more effectively. Get off your pedestal. In the opening story of this chapter, Jerry and Ethan at first can reference only their own definitions of the word fresh. Well, the Merriam-Webster dictionary lists more than 15 different ways fresh can be used. Jerry and Ethan's problem was that they were consulting only the abridged versions of their own dictionaries, defaulting to the first definition that sprang to mind for each of them. It only makes sense that we all process information differently, compiling it into our individual dictionaries. How we respond to situations is shaped by what we have already experienced, and these experiences are our reference points. Put another way, this is what I like to call your pedestal. We spend our lives piling up information, experiences, and encounters, and when we're in new situations, we view them from atop these stockpiles of personal knowledge that we've accumulated over the years. These piles are our pedestals. Although pedestal building is natural, the problem is that no one else is up there with us. No one looks out at the world with the exact same viewpoint we do. That's why it is so critical to stay open to the notion that our perceptions might not be entirely accurate, and to continually ask ourselves, how else can I interpret the situation? By staying mindful of different possibilities and realities, we create opportunities for increased communication, understanding, and connection. Use your clarifying probes to further your comprehension of other people's perspectives, then employ intuitive listening to grasp their full meanings. Step into someone else's shoes to appreciate their way of thinking. In other words, get off your pedestal. Listen with your eyes. We've just learned how intuitive listening is about listening to what's being communicated nonverbally as much as verbally. It's about listening with your eyes as well as with your ears. The woman at the conference who suddenly hijacked an otherwise amiable group conversation was oblivious to this concept. Had she been listening with her eyes, she would have heard that the others in the group may have had things to contribute, but felt as if they were shut out of the conversation while she was talking. As a result, she closed herself off to deepening her connections with that group of associates. We are constantly in situations where it's valuable to listen with our eyes. When discussing a possible new project with a group of direct reports, the ones who perk up at the description of the assignment are the ones who we sense have the most enthusiasm, even if they haven't said so explicitly. Hearing it with our eyes may result in assigning them to the project. When we notice that a boss has forgotten a junior colleague's name, we might slip the information naturally into the conversation to help the boss out. This technique can be extremely helpful in determining the right moment to close a conversation, too. Is your client looking at her watch and starting to gather her papers? Take the cue that it's time to wrap things up. If you're unsure, provide an out for the other person by remarking, "I don't want to take too much of your time," or "Would you like some time to think about it?" If the person doesn't take the bait, you know that she still wants to stay engaged in the current conversation. Use your eyes to hear what's being expressed in nonverbal ways. Catch your drift, dealing with distractions. Active listening can be difficult, in part because the mind is so easily distracted. Passively nodding is one thing, but to really listen you must be alert and attuned. You must be focused. To make things even more difficult, distractions can compound the distractions. I can't count how many times I've been in the middle of a conversation and suddenly remembered something unrelated that I've been trying to remember. At that point, I'm distracted not just by the thought, but by the process of trying to remember the thought. The result, of course, is that it becomes extremely challenging to give someone my undivided attention. Over the years, I've learned some techniques that help me manage my internal interruptions and stop my mind from drifting. Just say it. When my mind is caught up in a distraction, the best way for me to handle it isn't to cover it up, but rather to simply say something about it. I don't blurt out, "Hold on, I'm distracted. I have to cancel my dentist's appointment." But I do find a way to take a mental pause while letting the speaker know I'm still interested in what they are saying. In these circumstances, I'll just say, "Give me a moment. I don't want to miss the rest of the story, but I've just remembered something I don't want to forget." By putting words to your passing thoughts, you lessen the chance that you'll nonverbally signal, through your facial expressions and body language, that you are distracted and disinterested in the other person. Instead, you can reaffirm that you are interested in what is being said, because you are taking a quick second to eliminate the distraction so that you can prioritize the conversation at hand. Make a habit of this technique. Employ other methods as well, as detailed in the next sections, but always use them in conjunction with the just say it rule. Jot it down. One of the most effective ways to eliminate distractions is to write them down. Try to carry a pen and paper on you at all times, and at those moments when you can't, use the note-taking or voice recording application on your smartphone. This can also be an extremely effective method for preventing future distractions. When you are in the middle of a meeting or a conversation, and hear something or have a thought that you don't want to forget, write it down. It will prevent you from getting distracted trying to remember it later. You don't need to copy things down in full sentences. Just capture a few key words or phrases to jolt your memory and help bring the thoughts back to the surface when you look at the notes later on. Invite them along. I was at a neighborhood party one evening soon after we'd moved to a new town, and didn't know anyone there except my husband. Famished, I only half-jokingly said to my new neighbors that I was so distracted by my hunger, I couldn't follow the conversation until the guy with the chicken skewers came back around. Attempting to lure the hors d'oeuvres bearers to our corner of the room became a game. It turned out that I wasn't the only one who hadn't had a chance to eat before the event, and our joking around was a great icebreaker that kept the conversation flowing for the rest of the night. Thirst is another distraction that can have a positive spin. When excusing yourself to the bar, ask if you can bring drinks back for the people you've been speaking with. This shows your consideration, as well as your interest in continuing the conversation. Or you can ask if anyone wants to join you in heading to the bar. It's another great way to stay in conversation with one or two people from the group, and possibly mingle with new people at the same time as you proceed through the crowd. Interject or postpone and follow up. Sometimes our minds drift because we're tired and not all that interested in the topic of conversation at hand. When that happens, try to rejuvenate the discussion. An interesting new topic can inject unexpected energy into the situation. Use a question or story about something related to the current conversation to lead it down a new path. Don't abruptly go off topic, because that will feel jarring to most other people. But try to tap into the stimulation that a lively discussion holds. For those times when you're simply too exhausted to muster the energy it takes to connect, it's best to just be honest about it and see if you can postpone the discussion. We're all busy, and people truly do understand exhaustion. Go ahead and just say it, and find out if you can reschedule. The key here is ensuring that the other person doesn't feel blown off. You want to communicate that the encounter is important to you, but you are currently not in the best state to engage or connect. Demonstrate your willingness to re-engage later by following up, and following up fast. Since you were the one to postpone, take the initiative to make the next meeting happen. How well do you listen? During my first week in business school, one of my professors said, "Society is an easier place for the extrovert." This is a provocative statement, and I've continued thinking about it over the years. I do agree that it's basically true, but I also think introverts possess unique skills that are extremely helpful when building relationships and growing connections. Introverts tend to think before they speak and listen before they talk. They are more inclined to ask than to tell, and this makes them far better suited than extroverts to embrace the laws of curiosity and listening. Being aware of your listening style, understanding how natural listening is for you, and where you might improve your skills, is one of the first steps in harnessing the full power of the law of listening. Listening is a crucial skill, and it is one that can be acquired. So work on making your skills even better. Live the law. How is your listening? We all have natural strengths as listeners, and we all have ways in which we can improve our listening skills. To follow is a list of listening traits. One group represents those traits that denote good listening, and the other group are common behaviors that get in the way of listening effectively. Note the 3 traits in the do list that you want to actively work on to enhance your listening skills. Then note the items you are already doing well to reinforce those good listening habits. In the don't list, recognize the 3 traits you are most prone to and that you want to tone down. Listening traits. Do. Maintain eye contact. Limit your talking. Focus on the speaker. Ask questions. Manage your emotions. Listen with your eyes and ears. Listen for ideas and opportunities. Remain open to the conversation. Confirm understanding and paraphrase. Give nonverbal messages that you are listening. Nod and smile. Ignore distractions. Don't interrupt, show signs of impatience, judge or argue mentally, multitask during a conversation, project your ideas, think about what to say next, have expectations or preconceived ideas, become defensive or assume you're being attacked, use condescending, aggressive, or closed body language, listen with biases or closed to new ideas, or jump to conclusions or finish someone's sentences. Improve your listening. Remember, we all have room for improvement. First, give yourself credit for the things you are already doing well. Consciously acknowledging your strengths reinforces them. Next, review the behaviors that you've determined you need to work on, and make a plan. How are you going to improve your listening in this area? Reread the catch or drift section for some ideas on managing mental interruptions and maintaining your mental focus. Everyone's plan will be different. You can also convert your weaknesses into strengths by using them as connection points in conversation. If you know that limit your talking is something you want to work on, because during conversations you are prone to enthusiastically interjecting in a way that can come off as interrupting, tell people in a light but forthright tone, "If I interrupt, just stop me." For people who already do a good job of appropriately limiting their talking, it can be jarring to feel as if they've been interrupted. By asking them to flag the interrupting behavior when you do it, you accomplish 2 things. You make the other person aware that you are actively trying to be a better listener, and you get help noticing when the negative behavior kicks in. The more that you notice this behavior, the easier it will be to correct it. If at first you need help realizing when you're doing it, don't feel bad. Soon you'll start catching it yourself and be able to adjust it on your own. Good listening is a win-win. Listening on deeper levels is not just about paying close attention to the other person. It is about actively participating in building the relationship. And it is also about you. As an effective listener, you will establish stronger connections with the people you engage. You'll have a more robust understanding of what is being said, and you'll get more out of conversations on the whole. Nathan, a former client of mine and now a friend, verbalized this idea so well to me one day. I had expressed how much I enjoyed talking to him, in part because I felt like he really listened to me. "You make me feel as if you were hanging on my every word," I remember saying. "I feel not only listened to, but cared about." Nathan smiled and said, "I wasn't always such a great listener." It wasn't until he realized how not listening well made people feel disconnected and ignored that he slowed down and began trying to really listen. And when he did, he explained, I saw how much I'd been missing from most conversations. He considered his efforts to enhance his listening skills the single most beneficial thing he'd done yet to improve his life, both personally and professionally. Listening well is a pathway to implementing other laws of likability. In the previous chapter, we've seen how it serves the law of curiosity. In Chapter 7, we'll discuss how it can enhance the law of similarity. And in Chapter 8, we'll look at how it impacts what I call mood memory. Listening is a powerful building block. Continue improving your listening skills, and your likability will naturally increase. Refresh your memory. The law of listening. You have to listen to understand. Listen to understand. If we want others to understand us, we have to understand them by truly listening to what they are communicating. Harness the 3 levels of listening. Inward listening, level 1, relates what you hear to you, and it helps establish commonalities and conversational ease. Outward listening, level 2, relates what you hear to the speaker. It leverages the law of curiosity to uncover interests and perspectives. Listening intuitively, level 3, is a powerful way to gain a deeper understanding of the situation, and possibly even help the speaker put words to things she hasn't as yet been expressing verbally. How you listen is key. To encourage communication and build meaningful connections, get off your pedestal and listen from other people's perspectives. And don't forget, sometimes good listening is done with your eyes as well as your ears. Manage distractions. Articulate when you need to regain your focus. Just say it. Jot down thoughts so that you won't be distracted trying to remember them later. And if you are too exhausted to muster the energy to truly engage, postpone and reschedule. Improve your listening. Take credit for the ways you already listen well, and note the areas where you can improve. Then set up a plan to work on those things. Good listening is a win-win. Not only does listening well make people feel heard and understood, it also enhances your experience of the situation and of the connection.